Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation to Amuse. It's really great to be here. I work for Creuna, which is a customer experience agency. We're based in Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and Finland. And we work with communication, design, and technology. Today, I'm going to talk about the project that I've been spending a lot of time when I've not been skiing over the last 2 years. And that's developing a new visual identity for the city of Oslo, Norway's capital. OK, that was not the right slide. There we go. OK, let's try again.
Norway's capital is a modern and growing city loved by its residents. It has 15 districts, 36 agencies, 53,000 employees, and countless projects and initiatives. But with over 250 logos in use, this caused confusion and clutter. That's why we created one identity to unite Oslo. 3 shapes, inspired by Oslo's streetscapes, are the basic building blocks of the identity system. The system is flexible and simple enough to be used by everyone for everything. The digital design assistant we created gives all 53,000 city employees the power to design communications themselves, easily, quickly, and correctly. Our font, Oslo Sans, is functional, versatile, and usable everywhere. The design is inspired by generations of Oslo street signs. Dots and punctuation marks are transformed into Oslo shapes. The design system adapts to the diversity of the city's institutions and services. It creates a unified identity across all channels and is designed for use in 2 dimensions, 3 dimensions, and motion. The new identity is a great tool to help Oslo and its residents to continue to connect and thrive together.
So you just seen the new identity for the city of Oslo. It's distinctive yet flexible. It's unifying with only one symbol for all the different organizations within the municipality of Oslo. So now it's easier for the citizens to understand what the city do and what kind of services it provides. This improved transparency helps build a closer bond between the citizens and the city, and it's a platform in which democracy in itself can flourish. I felt very privileged when we started on this work, but I also felt a bit humble. I'm born in Oslo, I'm raised in Oslo, and I live in Oslo, and this is something that I'm going to see every day for many years. So we really felt that we have to make something very good, and something that everybody in Norway, all the residents, could be really proud of. So no pressure. This is probably the most complex branding project in Norway in a very long time. And the reason why it's been so complicated is that because this had to be approved politically. And it has been a very long bureaucratic process. And the involvement of all the different organizations in Oslo that was necessary to get this improved was a lot more complicated than I could ever imagine when we started this project. And maybe luckily I wasn't aware of how it was going to be. Our main client for this project, they work for the communication department within the city hall, and it's also been a lot more complicated for them. This is not the typical project, and we didn't really know how to get this approved. And you know, with political processes, there's like a very strict framework, and this project does not fit in at all. So it also caused a bit of a headache for some of the lawyers working in the city of Oslo. But finally, March 27 this year, the identity was approved by the city council, and that was a big milestone for our project. So back to where we started. So the ambition for this project was to build a new coherent interface between the city and its citizens, to modernize and simplify the identity, and to make it clearer and more comprehensible and easier to understand for the citizens. But this is where we started. Over time, clutter had built up, and it was more than 250 logos in use. And because of this fragmentation, the citizens didn't understand what kind of services the city could provide and what actually the city did. And also, it's difficult to understand how our tax money is being spent. And it's also hugely expensive and complicated to manage all these different identities. So we made a very conservative estimate saying that the city of Oslo was actually spending 5 million euros a year just maintaining all these identities. So actually, in this project, there has been a goal to save the city of Oslo of quite a lot of money as well. So, but where do you start? We knew that this was going to be a complicated project. And the reason why is that the city of Oslo has more than 50,000 employees, organized in more than 250 organizations. And all those organizations, they had different perspectives, they had different needs within this process. And they also had their own logo, and they felt emotional attachment to those logos. The city of Oslo is a complex organization that has many roles in people's life. It's a service provider, it's a policymaker, and it's also authority. And there's a multitude of applications, both physically and digitally. And people really have an emotional attachment to the existing city seal. And obviously, we also had to navigate through this quite complicated and sometimes unpredictable political landscape. So, as we all know, the layers of information are becoming more and more complex, and more actors are screaming for our attention. So today is more important than ever for the city of Oslo and for all cities to present themselves in a clear, coherent, and tangible way. So we wanted to develop this interface. So in order to do that, we had to identify a robust yet simple to use brand strategy and a brand structure. So we had to define those Lego bricks. The Lego bricks for the Oslo brand structure that could help us reduce the number of logos, make it more tangible for its citizens, yet entail any eventualities. So how could we start to identify all those Lego bricks? I think we could easily have spent half our budget, and we probably could have spent an entire year just doing initial research, because there's so many questions to ask, and there's so many aspects and we had to consider. But we want to start to make real suggestions and prototyping as soon as possible. So we actually had a very short initial insight phase, just enough to make early hypotheses, and then we started to sketch out and prototype. And that wasn't only for the logo and the identity, but we worked in the same way also for the brand structure and the brand platform. So we started prototyping our brand platform. And then we've been working in many, many iterations. We would bring different people in, people working in the city of Oslo, and we would show them real suggestions and ask them, what do you think about this, and what do you think about that? We actually involved more than 1,500 people working within the city of Oslo, and they have actively been taking in the design process. And design by committee is something that is used as a negative term because it means they have to do a lot of compromises. But for us, design by committee has actually been something positive in this project. I think it's been crucial that we had this open and inclusive process. Otherwise, we would never got the result we did. And also, when you're going to tell people that you're going to lose your logo, you have to show them that's something that's better. We have to give them something better than what they had. So I think this involvement was really necessary to create enough ownership to make this go through. Another thing is that we've been working really close with the client. We had a great client, by the way, and we've been working as one team towards the same goal. No big presentations. They would come into our office on a daily basis, and we would show them sketches. And we've been really working as one team. And personally, I strongly believe in transparency and being honest, and also about being vulnerable to your client. And I think that's the best way to create great projects. This is a slide with lots of information, and it's even in Norwegian. So the aim here is not for you to be able to understand it, but it's just to show how it structurally have worked with insight and development, and how we've been working in sprints. And after each sprint, we've been asking ourselves, okay, so what have we learned? What are the questions that have been answered? And what are the questions that we need to ask in order to move forward? So we made a new brand platform for the city of Oslo. And we quite soon decided that we want the brand platform to be a story. And we want to be a story about the uniqueness of Oslo and its value to its citizens. So Oslo has gone through a big change over the last few decades. Whole new area has been developed. Lots of new services. Sustainability is high on the agenda, and there's been lots of changes. And all these changes, the city of Oslo has really been important in all these changes. A lot of those new services available that the citizens really love is because all the different service organizations within the city of Oslo provide those services. But very few citizens really understood that this was part of the city government. Actually, in fact, our research showed that very few people actually understood how their city government worked. So this unclear and fragmented identity meant that a lot of all the positive things that was happening, Oslo did not get recognized for all these successes and the steady progress. And these successes, they spent over many years and through several city administration throughout the whole political spectrum. So between this positive attitude in general for the city, and then the possibility for Oslo to present itself in a clearer and more relevant way, we saw a big opportunity for the city to build closer bonds with its citizens. In communication, we shortened the name. With the old identity, in Norwegian, it was Oslo Kommune, which means Municipality of Oslo, which has been translated to English for the city of Oslo. But we decided that for the new identity, we only want to use the word Oslo. And the reason why is that the residents have a lot more positive attitudes to only Oslo. We also saw that for these 250 plus organizations within the municipality, it was a lot easier for them to identify themselves with only Oslo. And also visually, obviously, it's a lot nicer and easier to work with. So the essence of the Oslo brand, Oslo is uniquely intimate, it's safe, it's close to nature, it's walkable, and yet it's big enough to be really diverse with a wide range of cultural offerings and many different people. Oslo remains a highly collaborative community, where important decisions are made by building consensus from the grassroots. And this broad engagement was one of the values that we really wanted to preserve. So we have now created a user-friendly identity with a monolithic brand structure, meaning that there's only one logo for all the different organizations. And having only one logo makes it a lot easier to unite everything that Oslo do, and it also makes it a lot easier to maintain and manage the identity. The launch of this project has been quite unusual. Normally, when you work in a project, you have a project group, you have some decision makers, you might have a reference group, and you do the necessary user testing, and then you're ready to launch, and when you're ready to launch, you can show it to the public, and then you start with the implementation. In this project, we've actually launched in several stages. And the reason why is that when we had a proposal, we had to send it out to all the different sub-organizations within the city of Oslo, and they had to give our feedback. But before we could send it out to all those organizations, we had to make it public. And at this point, the identity was still under development. And it was really painful to show something to the public and have a press conference while we were still during the development. And obviously, even though this was a pre-launch, when you launch something, it creates a lot of attention. And some people don't like it because people don't like change. But the good thing about this is that actually we got a lot of feedback, because this was posted then on different blogs internationally and nationally in social media. So we actually received a lot of good feedback. So this the pre-launch ended up being the biggest user test ever. And we actually did some significant changes to the identity based on the feedback that we got from this pre-launch. So this is the old city seal. It's from 1924. It got lots of details, many colors, and it's definitely not in accordance to guidelines for universal design, which is a legal requirement in Norway. And also, as you can see, it doesn't really work in smaller digital touchpoints. In the city seal, you see Sankt Halvard, and he's the saint of Oslo. But there's many representations of him throughout the city, so these are some of the ones we collected. When we start to the work, it's always nice and useful to look at what other cities have done. These are neighboring cities, and you can see the level of simplification and modernization has been different. We also looked at how other brands have modernized their identity. And then we had this city seal with all these different elements. And we knew that we have to do some tough prioritizations, because in order to simplify and modernize, we couldn't bring all the elements forward. So then we decided that these are the key elements. These are the elements in the logo that we need to keep. But during this process, we've been testing everything from the very simple donut that you can see to the left and to the more illustrative one. We all loved the donut, by the way, but we felt it's just taking away too much of the history with St. Halvard. These are just a few examples of the many hundred logos I've been testing and we're giving feedback. And then before we finally ended up here. So these are the colors for the identity. We want to have something unique, but we didn't want to have too many colors, but still we needed to have enough to give flexibility. We have 3 colors of blue, which is a quite obvious color. We have the fjord, and we also have blue trams. The national costume, the Oslo version, is blue. So blue is an important color for the city of Oslo. Oslo is a green city. It's surrounded by a big forest, and we also have lots of parks, and sustainability is high on the agenda. We also needed some warmer colors, and then we got inspired by the facades throughout the city. So when we developed this identity, we wanted to design something, this is a very complex organization with many different design needs. So we had to design something that would give us enough flexibility. So then these 3 shapes became the foundation of the identity and for the system. And these shapes, our inspiration, were throughout the city. We were looking for architectural details and in the cityscape. And obviously, these shapes, they're not unique in themselves. I mean, you can't really take ownership to a circle or square. But the way we present them and the way we use them make them something recognizable and unique to Oslo. You can also find these basic shapes in the logo, and they also represent an important part of the history of St. Halvard. We can also use those shapes to write the name Oslo in a bit more abstract way. And the system is based on a quite basic grid where the shapes are placed. And the grid system gives us almost an unlimited numbers of variety, but still it's quite easy to use, and it's also recognizable. With so many communication needs, we had to identify a system where we could scale it up and down, sometimes being more minimalistic or maybe formal, and sometimes we could scale it up and it could be more complex or more playful. We developed illustrations, and the illustrations, they're based on the Oslo shapes. But we felt we had to make them slightly more organic to make the illustrations a little bit less abstract. So here's a few more examples. And then they can be animated to give them more life and give them more playfulness. We also designed an icon system. Again, this is based on the grid and the Oslo shapes, but then with a customization. Fonts are an important part of the identity. We want to make something that's recognizable, and then we got inspired by the street signs in Oslo, which has been around for many years. So when we were developing this font, we had to make something that's highly legible and something that's according to guidelines for universal design. And we need to find the right balance. We want to get something that's unique and something that's recognizable, but we also need to make something that can last for many years. And something that can be used in all sizes and on any possible touch points you can think about. So we ended up with those 4 weights, and we worked with an excellent font designer. And I think we've found the right balance that some of the times the identity, and the expressions have to be formal, and sometimes they can be more playful. And I think we managed to find a right balance. We don't have always to use the Oslo shapes. So the font in itself and the colors, there are enough to create it recognizable. Some of the touch points, they're more authoritative or formal, whereas other ones, they can be more friendly. With so many different organizations within the city of Oslo, there's different communication needs. So what we've done with a few of these organizations is that we've kind of created a visual concept, but that's within the visual framework. So Culture in Norway is written with K, and this is for the Department of Culture within the city of Oslo. And then based on the Oslo shapes, we generated these different Ks, and then we can use them together with images, and this creates a unique expression for this organization. We also did a campaign for the local elections in Norway this year. So we did all the communication. We also needed to find, kind of like an expression that was unique. And then we made this campaign to make more people vote. Because during the local elections in Norway, the number of people who vote, it's too low. So then we created this campaign. And then this is how it looked in social media.
Stemme, ta valget.
For deg.
Bruk stemmeretten din på valgdagene.
So this is a waste track that we've designed. What we just finished is a guideline for signage. This is obviously from the old identity. Signage is important just because they're everywhere. They're all throughout the city. And again, we wanted to take advantage of this system and shape. And again, we were looking for those Lego bricks that could make this flexible system. So now this is then the system for the signs that we've created and that we now just are being implemented. So we're now testing and we're prototyping, and the signs will be implemented over the next 4 years. So here's another example. And then this is an example that a reception area that we made. And here's another example. We've been testing and sketching ideas for how we can use such shapes in urban areas and also for furniture. So we're really happy that we were able to also work with motion design for this identity, which is not something we get the possibility to do in every project. So since the Oslo shape is inspired by the cityscape, we wanted to preserve their connection to the city also in motion design. So this means that you don't see the shapes move around, but they will always enter and exit within the grid system, and then staying true to the overall visual look. So when we had the motion design principle in place, we can then start to do the detailing in the dynamic design. And we quickly decided that the shapes could expand and extract within their own boundaries, and that the motion curve should communicate something solid yet flexible. So the motion curve can also be applied in web design and for UI animation, and it can also be used for transitions in film. So now I'm going to show you another project when we were taking motion design a step further, where we then used audio input and made those shapes react to the audio.
Dørene lukkes.
That was the sound of Oslo. In an organization with 53,000 people, there's lots of design needs where there's no budget for hiring a professional designer. So we were thinking and had an ambition, so how can we make an easy-to-use tool that requires basically no design software, and also anybody can use without having any design skills whatsoever, and also a way to create ownership to the identity and to make sure that everything is in accordance with the design guidelines. So we created the Oslo Digital Design Guidelines. So now any of the municipalities, 53,000 people, can input information, they can upload picture, they can choose a template, and then they can very easily generate their own design. And then they can shuffle around until they find a design that they like. And these are a few examples that's been generated from this online tool. And as you can see, it's very consistent while still offer a great variety. In order to establish a new design system, we've been working a team with designer from Creuna, but also designer from the city of Oslo. So for digital touchpoint, there's less room for using those shapes as decoration. So functionality is more important than the visual playfulness. So the focus has really been, how can we tie those shapes to functionality? And this way, how can we create a clear identity that does not come at the expenses of usability? So the first service that was using this new design system is the Oslo website. This is a massive website with several thousand pages, ranging for loads of different characters. So in constructing this system, it's been essential to establish a component-based solution so that the new design could be smoothly implemented. The components are the basis for all new digital services to be built. And the components are based so they can be reused and be implemented through a component library throughout the city's various digital touchpoints. And so that the user experience can be holistically and efficiently implemented by all designers and developers. And at the same time that we ensure that, as always, we follow the established conventions. So the new design offers a great variety, yet being entirely consistent. So now it's easily recognizable and it has a coherent user experience, which was not the case with the old identity. And then we have the Oslo Digital Design Guidelines, and they have system elements, they have inspirations, examples of use, downloadable templates, etc., as well as a digital design tool. So our focus has always been is to focus really on inspirations and examples. We strongly believe that we should focus on inspiration rather than strict rules and regulation. And inspiration is the best way to motivate and inspire others to take this identity in use and to make great design. I've been now presenting the new identity for Oslo, and it will be implemented over the next 4 years. And it's really great to see the identity already popping up throughout the city. And is looking really forward for this identity to be even more visible. Yeah, that was everything I wanted to present. And if you have any questions, please stay in touch and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I was sitting next to Zsuzsa in the front row, and we keep looking at each other like, you melted our brains. Some questions. How did you manage to educate so many stakeholders to use the new branding properly?
Yes. Obviously, implementation is always a tricky one, especially because it's so big organization. And the different organizations, they have different agencies, and they also have in-house designers. So there's many who's going to implement this. So I think it's just, as I said, use inspiration, use guidelines, and then not always it's like 100% correctly implemented, but you just have to live with that. We're not going to make it perfect, but it's going to be 1,000 times better than it was before. But implementation, it's tricky, and especially in such a complex and big organization.
So it almost sounds like you invited the designers at these other agencies to start using the system,
yeah.
And then they have some flexibility to kind of come up with their own way of using it?
Well, there are guidelines and there's regulations, but we try to keep it as open as possible. This is identity that gives lots of room for flexibility, but, we do have something that we're quite strict about, and I think that's mainly about the brand structure, because going from 250 logos to one, that's complicated. And previously, it was all about how they were presenting the organizational chart, so all these like sub-organizations, they really want to present themselves, but for a user, they don't care. If you see like something throughout the city, you care about whether it's the municipality of Oslo, but you don't really care, which are like this, where in the organization it sits. So that's been some of the tricky part, because they still want to tell the public, that we are, this subdivision. So, but we're working on it, and we're getting there.
In Oslo, what is the penalty for using Comic Sans? No, I'm kidding. It's death, isn't it?
Yeah.
Thought so. How did you convince all the branded agencies to let go of their identities? These are things that I'm sure they embraced and were proud of, and you had to tell them to stop. What was the resistance like?
I think a few things. First of all, because we had this massively involving process. We had 1,500 people take part in the process. And that created...
Sorry, say that one more time.
1,500 people that took actively part in the design process. Not designers, but, we were showing them, real suggestions, and they gave us real feedback, you can't do this, and, we recommend that you do this. So I think that was really important, and all the most important organizations have been part of the design process. But I think the other aspect as well is that we had to give them something better than what they had. Because all these organizations, they had a logo, but like their toolbox was quite poor. So, and then we created this really rich toolbox, and we said, okay, you're going to lose your logo, but we're going to give you this super rich toolbox with all these possibilities. And I think that was really the game changer when they said, okay, you know what, this is a lot better. We're more than willing to give up our logo. So I think that was like the point.
I see. So it's in a way you kind of gave them superpowers. They could do way more than they could with the old system.
Yeah.
We all have to know, how long did this take? From start to finish.
Yes.
It seems like it's just rolling out.
The development took about a year, and then the political process took about another year. But we're still developing. I mean, we're still, it's not finished. And we started implementation, but now we're building new functionality to the digital design assistant, the guidelines, the design system. So this is something that we're still working on, but we're implementing, and then it will slowly expand.
Mm-hmm. So a little over 2 years.
Yeah.
And what's the composition of the core team, the central group that...
Yeah. In total from Creuna, we've been about 25 people, but we have like a core group of 7-8 people. So then I've been managing the process and been advisor, had 2 other brand strategists. We had 3, 4, 5 designers, a product manager, and kind of the big group. But then, we had developers and copywriters, and, so it's a big project. And then it was 2 people working in the city of Oslo full-time being project managers. And they have done a fantastic job.
Amazing. Thanks for sharing the story.
OK, thank you.